Aminata's bare feet pressed against the cold stone floor of the forbidden library. Her heart thumping so loud she feared it might wake the entire palace. The candle in her hand flickered, casting shaky shadows on the towering shelves of ancient scrolls. She shouldn't be here. No one was allowed in this part of the palace, not even the princes. But something pulled her, a whisper in her heart that said answers were hidden among these dusty tomes. "I don't belong here," she murmured, her voice barely above a breath. "But my heart won't let me leave." Her dark eyes scanned the shelves, searching for something. Anything about her mother. Then a creak. Her breath caught. A shadow shifted behind a shelf, too quick to be a trick of the light. Someone was watching her. Her grip tightened on the candle, wax dripping onto her trembling fingers. She spun around, but the darkness swallowed the figure. Was it one of the princes? A guard? Or something worse? Ammonata's life in the palace had always been a tightrope walk. At 18, she was no stranger to the stares and whispers that followed her through the grand halls. Her skin, a rich brown, stood out against the pale faces of the court. Her tightly coiled hair a stark contrast to the sleek, pin-straight locks of the noblewomen. She was the African girl, raised by the Empress herself, but never truly one of them. Her mother, Nia, had been a maid, or so the story went. A kind woman with a bright smile, Nia had served the Empress faithfully until she died giving birth to Aminata. The Empress, Liang, had taken the newborn into her arms, promising to raise her alongside her own sons, Liang, Wei, and Jun, the three crown princes, all 2 years older than Ammonata. It was a kindness that shaped Aminata's life, but also a chain. She was neither servant nor royalty, forever caught in between. That night, as Aminata slipped back to her chambers, her mind raced. Why had she gone to the library? She couldn't explain it, not even to herself. It was a pull, a memory of her mother's voice, soft and melodic, telling her stories of a faraway land with golden savannas and star-filled skies. Nia had promised her daughter would know who she was one day. But how could Aminata know anything when no one spoke of her mother? The Empress was kind, but her answers were vague. The princes were her friends, her brothers in all but blood. But even they grew quiet when Aminata asked about Nia. The library was her last hope, but now she'd been seen. Her heart pounded as she slid under her silk blankets. The candle snuffed out. Whoever was watching her knew she was searching. And that scared her more than anything. The next morning, the palace buzzed with preparations for the spring festival, a grand celebration where the court gathered to honor the empire's prosperity. Aminata stood before a polished bronze mirror, adjusting the flowing robes the Empress had gifted her. They were beautiful, deep blue with silver embroidery, but they felt foreign on her body. She longed for the bright, patterned wraps her mother had described, the ones worn by women in her homeland. "You look stunning," a voice said, breaking her thoughts. Wei, the second prince, leaned against the doorway, his grin wide and mischievous. His dark hair fell loosely over his forehead, and his eyes sparkled with something that made Aminata's cheeks warm. "Stop staring," she muttered, turning away to hide her blush. Wei laughed, stepping closer. "Can't help it. You're the only one who makes these boring robes look alive." Liang, the eldest prince, appeared behind Wei. His face calm but his eyes sharp. "Wei, leave her be. The Empress is waiting." His voice was steady, but there was a tightness in it, a flicker of something when he looked at Aminata. She felt it, that unspoken weight in his gaze, but she pushed it away. Liang was the heir, destined to marry Lady May, a noblewoman whose beauty was matched only by her ambition. Wei, though, had no such ties. He winked at Aminata as he sauntered off, leaving her heart in a tangle. Jun, the youngest prince, was nowhere to be seen. He was often like that, quiet, slipping away to paint or read, his gentle smile hiding thoughts he rarely shared. The festival was a whirlwind of color and sound. Red lanterns swayed in the breeze, and musicians played soft tunes on lutes and flutes. The court gathered in the open courtyard, nobles in their finest silks whispering behind painted fans. Aminata stood beside the Empress, who smiled warmly but kept a firm hand on her arm, as if anchoring her. "You'll perform tonight," Liang said, her voice kind but firm. "Your mother's dance. It will honor her." Aminata's stomach twisted. She hadn't danced since she was a child, practicing the steps Nia had taught her in secret. The dance was from her mother's homeland, a rhythmic sway of hips and arms that felt like a heartbeat. But here, in this court of rigid traditions, it was a risk. She nodded though, because refusing the Empress was impossible. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Ammonata stepped into the center of the courtyard. The crowd fell silent. She closed her eyes, picturing her mother's face, and began to move. Her feet tapped the ground, her arms flowed like rivers, and her body swayed to a rhythm only she could hear. The dance was alive, wild, nothing like the measured steps of the court's performances. For a moment, she was free, lost in the memory of Nia's voice singing her to sleep. When she finished, breathless, the silence broke into murmurs. Some clapped, others stared, their eyes narrowed. "Exotic," one noblewoman whispered, her tone sharp. "Improper," another muttered. But the princes were different. Wei clapped loudly, his grin wide. June's eyes shone with something soft, almost sad. Liang stood still, his hands clenched, his face unreadable. Lady Mei, standing beside Liang, noticed his gaze. Her perfect smile tightened, and her eyes locked onto Ammonata like a hawk spotting prey. Mei was everything Ammonata wasn't. Pale, delicate, born to this world of silk and power. Her betrothal to Liang was a step toward securing her family's influence, and she wouldn't let a maid's daughter threaten it. As the festival continued, Mei glided through the crowd, her words sweet but pointed. "Such a bold performance," she said to a group of noblewomen, loud enough for Aminata to hear. Almost too bold for a girl of her background. The women tittered, and Aminata's cheeks burned. She wanted to snap back, but the Empress's hand on her shoulder stopped her. "Ignore them," Liang whispered. "You are my daughter in all but name." The words were meant to comfort, but they only deepened Aminata's ache. If she was family, why did she feel so alone? Later that night, unable to sleep, Aminata wandered the palace halls. The festival's laughter still echoed in her mind, but so did Mei's words and the nobles' stares. She found herself near the Empress's private chambers, drawn by a raised voice. She pressed herself against a pillar, hidden in the shadows. Inside, the Empress was speaking to a man whose voice was low and urgent. "The girl's presence endangers the throne," he said. "She must never know her true heritage." Aminata's heart stopped. Her heritage. What did that mean? The Empress's voice was sharp. "She is my responsibility. I made a promise to Nia." The man scoffed. "A promise that could cost you everything." Footsteps approached, and Aminata fled, her pulse racing. She stumbled into her room, slamming the door, her breath ragged. What secret was the Empress hiding about her mother? And why did it threaten the throne? Her mind spun with questions, each one heavier than the last. She thought of her mother's stories, the ones about a land far across the sea, where queens wore crowns of beads and warriors danced under the moon. Was that her heritage? Was there more to Nia than a maid's life? Aminata sank onto her bed, clutching the small wooden pendant her mother had left her, the only piece of her she had. It was carved with a strange symbol, one she'd never understood. The shadow in the library, the whispers at the festival, the Empress's argument, they all pointed to something bigger, something dangerous. Aminata's chest tightened with fear, but also with a spark of determination. She wasn't just the African girl, the outsider. She was Nia's daughter, and she would find the truth, no matter what it cost. As she lay in the dark, the pendant pressed against her palm, a chill ran through her. The shadow in the library hadn't just been watching, it had followed her. She heard it now, a faint shuffle outside her door. Her eyes widened, fixed on the handle as it began to turn slowly, the soft creak piercing the silence. Someone was coming for her. Aminata's heart raced as Wei's hand gripped hers, pulling her through the palace's hidden garden. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine, and moonlight spilled over the stone path, but she barely noticed. Wei's words echoed in her ears, soft and urgent. "If I'm a prince, why can't I choose who I love?" His dark eyes locked onto hers, his usual playful grin gone, replaced by something raw, something that made her chest tighten. She opened her mouth to speak, to tell him this was dangerous, that they couldn't, but a sharp whistle cut through the night. An arrow sliced past her cheek, embedding itself in a tree with a thud. Aminata froze, her breath caught. Another arrow followed, then another, whistling from the shadows. Wei shoved her behind him, shouting, "Get down!" Her knees hit the ground and her mind spun. Who was shooting? Was it her they wanted, or Wei? The garden erupted into chaos. Liang appeared, his sword drawn, his face hard as stone. "Stay with her!" he barked at Wei, charging toward the trees where the arrows had come from. Wei pulled Ammonata close, his arm a shield around her, his breath fast and uneven. "You're okay," he whispered, but his voice shook. June emerged from the darkness, his eyes wide but calm, scanning the shadows like he saw something no one else did. Guards flooded the garden, their torches casting flickering light, but the attackers were gone, melted into the night. Aminata's hands trembled as she pushed herself up, her robe smeared with dirt. Her mind flashed to the night before, the shadow in the library, the creak of her door. Someone was after her, and now they'd struck again. The Empress's voice was like a whip when she summoned them to her chambers. Liang stood tall, her silk robes pristine, but her eyes were sharp with worry. "No one leaves the palace until we find who did this," she said, her gaze lingering on Ammonata. "Especially you." Ammonata's stomach twisted. She wanted to argue, to demand why she was being caged, but the Empress's tone left no room for questions. Liang stood rigid, his jaw tight, saying nothing. Wei, still flushed from the fight, snapped, "She didn't do anything wrong." But Yeling's hand shot up, silencing him. "This is for her safety," she said, but Aminata felt the weight of those words. Safety felt like a prison. The next day, the palace felt smaller, the walls closing in. Aminata paced her room, her thoughts a tangle of fear and frustration. The attack had shaken her, but so had Wei's words. He'd looked at her like she was more than the maid's daughter, more than the outsider. But Liang's quiet protection, the way he'd run toward danger without hesitation, tugged at her heart too. And June, where had he been during the chaos? She hadn't seen him until it was over. His face unreadable. She needed air, needed to think. Slipping past the guards, she found June in the art pavilion, a quiet corner of the palace where he spent hours painting. He sat cross-legged, a brush in his hand, his dark hair falling into his eyes. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly, not looking up. "It's not safe." Aminata sat beside him, ignoring his warning. "I can't stay locked up forever," she said, her voice sharp. June's brush paused, and he looked at her, his eyes soft but heavy. "You're braver than you know," he said, almost a whisper. He handed her a sketch, and her breath caught. It was her, captured in soft charcoal lines. Her eyes bright, her smile faint, like he'd seen something in her she didn't see herself. "Why did you draw this?" she asked, her voice trembling. June's cheeks flushed, and he looked away. "Because you're you," he said, so quiet she barely heard. Her heart skipped, but before she could speak, a servant's voice interrupted, calling her back to her rooms. As she left, June's gaze followed her, a secret hidden in his silence. The court was buzzing with rumors, and Aminata felt them like needles on her skin. Lady May was at the center, her smile sharp as she spoke to a group of noblewomen in the great hall. "That dance at the festival," May said, loud enough for Aminata to hear as she passed. "It's no wonder the princes are acting strange. She's bewitched them." The women gasped, their fans fluttering, and Aminata's face burned. She wanted to shout, to tell them her dance was her mother's, not some spell. But she kept walking, her hands clenched. May's words weren't just gossip. They were a weapon meant to push Aminata further into the shadows. She felt the court's eyes on her, judging, always judging. Even the servants whispered now, their glances cold. She was losing the fragile place she'd carved out in this world. That night, Aminata couldn't sleep. The Empress's words from the festival, "You are my daughter in all but name," felt hollow now. If she was family, why was she watched like a thief? Why did the Empress argue about her heritage in secret? The pendant around her neck, her mother's only gift, felt heavier than ever. She needed answers. Slipping out of her room, she crept back to the forbidden library, her heart pounding with every step. The guards were distracted, talking about the attack, and she moved like a shadow, her candle barely a flicker. The library was dark, the air thick with dust. She ran her fingers along the shelves, searching for anything that might hold a piece of her mother. Her hand stopped on a loose panel in the wall. Her pulse quickened as she pried it open, revealing a small, hidden compartment. Inside was a single letter, folded and worn, the paper yellowed with age. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded it. The writing was in a script she didn't know, sharp and flowing, but she recognized one word, Nia, her mother's name. Her eyes scanned the page, catching phrases in a language she couldn't read, but some words were in the Empire's tongue. "Promise to the Empress," the letter said. "Dangerous truth." Aminata's breath hitched. What promise? What truth? Her mother wasn't just a maid, was she? The letter slipped from her fingers as a shadow fell across the room. She spun around, her candle flickering wildly. June stood in the doorway, his face pale, his eyes dark with something she couldn't name. "You shouldn't have seen that," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. Aminata's heart slammed against her ribs. June, the quiet one, the one who drew her with such care, now looked like a stranger. "What is this?" she demanded, holding up the letter, her voice shaking with anger and fear. June stepped closer, his hands raised as if to calm her, but his eyes were wide, desperate. "Aminata, please. You don't understand what you're doing." She backed away, clutching the letter to her chest. "Then tell me," she snapped. "What's my mother's truth? Why is everyone hiding it?" June's face twisted, like he was fighting something inside himself. "It's not safe," he said, his voice breaking. "Not for you, not for us." He reached for the letter, but she pulled it back, her eyes blazing. The air between them crackled, heavy with unspoken secrets. Footsteps echoed in the hall, heavy and fast. Guards or someone worse. June grabbed her arm, his grip tight. "Hide it," he hissed. "Now." Ammonata shoved the letter into her robe, her mind racing. June pulled her behind a shelf just as the door creaked open. A figure stood there, cloaked in shadow, their voice low and cold. "She's here," they said. "Find her." Aminata's blood ran cold. Her eyes locked with June's, and for a moment she saw fear in his gaze, but also something else, guilt. Her heart pounded as the figure stepped into the library, their boots heavy on the stone floor. The letter burned against her skin, its words a mystery that could change everything. Whoever was hunting her knew she was close to the truth. And June, her quiet, gentle June, was part of it. As the figure's shadow loomed closer, Aminata held her breath, trapped between the boy she trusted and the secrets that could destroy her.